impacting one of the most devastating, truly defining chapters in human history, World War II. Now, we're not just going to rattle off dates and battles here. We're going to dig into the massive global shifts, the catastrophic decisions, and the unbelievable ripple effects that literally built the world we live in today. So let's just dive right in and uncover how humanity plunged into total war. Right at the climax. I want you to picture this for a second. It's 8:15 in the morning on August 6th, 1945. People in Japan are heading to work, kids are walking to school, everything is just completely normal. And then, out of nowhere, a blinding flash from the sky. In a matter of seconds, that normal morning turns into an absolute inferno. The temperatures at the blast point reached an insane 3,000 to 4,000 degrees Celsius. It literally felt like the sun itself had just crashed into the earth. This catastrophic event forced Japan's surrender and suddenly thrust the entire world into the terrifying reality of the atomic age. But to truly understand how we reached such an apocalyptic moment, we have to look back at the sheer scale of everything that came before it. Now wrap your head around this staggering number. 60 to 80 million people lost their lives in this conflict. And to put that into perspective for you, 50 million of those were civilians, alongside 25 million soldiers. We have never, before or since, seen so many lives lost in a single conflict. This wasn't just two armies clashing on a battlefield. This was a total war. Nations were literally weaponizing their entire economies, their industries, even their scientific research against each other. Civilians became targets. Homes, hospitals, shelters, they were all bombed. It is, without a doubt, the deadliest conflict in human history. Section 1. The Seeds of Destruction. How did humanity get here? So how did the world actually arrive at such total devastation? Well, we have to look at the seeds of destruction that were planted decades before anyone even fired a shot in World War II. The globe was essentially split into two massive factions. On one side, you've got the Allies, the UK, France, the USA, the USSR, and China. On the other side, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, here's a really fascinating detail. During the First World War, Italy was actually fighting on the side of the Allies. But after World War I ended, Italy felt totally ignored, both financially and politically, by the winning nations. They didn't get the rewards they were promised, their economy was tanking, and that deep, boiling resentment, that's exactly what pushed them to switch sides and join forces with Germany for round two. The real root of this massive divide goes all the way back to 1919 with the Treaty of Versailles. When World War I ended, the victorious Allies basically carved up the losing nations. France was terrified, and understandably so, because they shared a direct border with Germany, so they pushed for the absolute harshest terms possible to guarantee their own safety. Germany was forced to sign a war guilt clause, basically taking 100% of the blame for the entire war. They got slammed with £6.6 billion in reparations, and they were forced to demilitarize the Rhineland, which was a super important buffer zone. Essentially, Germany was stripped of its land, its military, and its national dignity all in one go. And as you might guess, these punishing terms sparked a rapid economic catastrophe. After the treaty in 1919, the German government tried to pay off its massive debts by, well, simply printing more money, huge amounts of it. By 1923, this led to massive hyperinflation. The US did step in briefly with the Dawes Plan, which gave them a short window of stability between 1924 and 1928. But then, bam, the 1929 Wall Street crash happens. The US has to yank its financial aid back, and Germany's economy goes right into a total free fall. Industrial production plummeted by 40%, and suddenly 6 million Germans were out of work, starving, and absolutely desperate for a solution. To really grasp how surreal and painful this economic ruin was under the Weimar Republic, you have to look at the inflation. It was so incredibly severe that the currency became literally worthless. I mean, people were taking actual wheelbarrows full of cash to the store just to buy one single loaf of bread. Kids were out in the streets playing with giant bundles of cash like building blocks, simply because the paper it was printed on was worth more than the money itself. Obviously, the people completely lost faith in their government, which seemed totally powerless to fix anything. Section 2. Hitler's rise and expansion. A dictator takes control. Think about it. When an entire population is starving, humiliated, and feeling totally abandoned by their government and the League of Nations, they become incredibly vulnerable. They become super easy to manipulate, especially by a charismatic extremist speaker promising to bring back their lost glory. Harnessing that exact desperation, Adolf Hitler took some chillingly methodical steps to gain absolute power. It wasn't an overnight coup. He rode the wave of the people's anger. His Nazi party won elections, and he was officially appointed chancellor in January 1933. And once he had his foot in the door, he didn't waste a second. He pushed through the Enabling Act, which legally dismantled German democracy and gave him absolute unchecked dictatorial control. Right after that, he pulled Germany out of the League of Nations, which was a huge flashing warning sign to the world that he was done playing by international rules. With absolute power locked down, Hitler started rapidly and aggressively expanding his war machine. He promised to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, and well, that's exactly what he did. In 1938, he brazenly marched his troops straight back into the demilitarized Rhineland. Next, he annexed Austria, merging the two nations. Then, he set his sights on Czechoslovakia and captured that too. And what was the rest of Europe doing during all this? The Allied powers mostly just sat by and watched. They were really hoping that if they just gave Hitler what he wanted, he'd eventually stop and peace would be maintained. But man, that was a fatal miscalculation. Section 3. The World at War. The Point of No Return. So the appeasement totally ends here. By September 1, 1939, Hitler wanted even more territory, but he needed an excuse. So Germany actually staged a false flag operation, dressing their own soldiers in Polish uniforms to pretend they were being attacked, just to justify invading Poland. Bound by a defense pact, the UK and France had no choice. They immediately declared war. But Hitler's sheer arrogance quickly backed him into a two-front nightmare. Over in the west, his air battle of Britain totally failed against fierce British resistance. Frustrated by that, and obsessed with conquering Eastern Europe, he made his biggest mistake yet. He broke his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and launched Operation Barbarossa in the east. His troops were completely unprepared for the brutal Russian winter. They froze in their tracks, and it allowed the Red Army to start pushing them all the way back. Those fatal miscalculations by the Axis powers completely flipped the script of the war. While Hitler's forces were literally freezing in the east, Japan made the massive error of bombing the US naval base at Pearl Harbor. In a single day, that brought the immense, totally fresh industrial and military might of America right into the conflict. Surrounded on all sides, the German army got relentlessly steamrolled back to Berlin by Soviet forces. Realizing that total defeat was absolutely inevitable, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker in 1945, which quickly led to the collapse and surrender of Germany. Section 4. The Aftermath and India, a global rebuilding. While the fighting in Europe in the Pacific finally ground to a halt, ending with those catastrophic atomic bombings we talked about earlier, the aftermath completely redrew the map of the world. And to really understand a global conflict, we absolutely have to look at regions that are so often left out of mainstream history. Take India, for example. Because India was under British colonial rule, they were automatically pulled into the war on the Allied side. Just look at these staggering numbers. 2.5 million Indian soldiers fought against the Axis powers. 87,000 of those troops tragically lost their lives.
Over 34,000 were heavily wounded, and more than 67,000 were taken as prisoners of war. The sheer scale of India's direct military involvement is often overlooked, but it was absolutely vital to the Allied war effort.
But the sacrifice didn't just happen on the battlefield. 3 million people. Take a second to process that. That is the staggering estimated number of civilian deaths in India. Not from bullets, not from bombs, but from the horrific 1943 Bengal famine. So you might be asking yourself, how on earth does a war in Europe and the Pacific cause millions of people to starve to death in Bengal? Well, the source material breaks down this devastating economic domino effect. The British government started massively exporting raw materials, food, and grain out of India specifically to feed their troops fighting abroad. At the exact same time, local laborers in Bengal, who usually got paid in grain, were now being paid in cash. It's this incredibly cruel irony. They finally had cash in their pockets, but because literally all the grain was being shipped out for the war, there was zero food left to buy in the local markets. Prices went through the roof, and millions of vulnerable laborers, elderly folks, and children were just left to die of starvation and disease right there on the streets.
By the time the dust settled, the world was fundamentally changed. Europe's economy was completely wrecked, its infrastructure was just gone. The USA and the USSR emerged from the rubble as the new global superpowers. But they instantly entered into a super tense Cold War that would shadow the world for decades. But crucially, this war also bankrupted the great colonial empires. Britain was financially devastated. They simply didn't have the resources to suppress massive uprisings in their colonies anymore. In India, the Quit India movement gained immense, unstoppable momentum. The war basically acted as a massive catalyst that directly forced the British to leave, ultimately leading to India's hard-won independence in August 1947.
In the aftermath of all this unimaginable destruction, the old League of Nations was completely scrapped, and the United Nations was born from the ashes. It had one primary goal: to make absolutely sure a global catastrophe like this never happened again. Today, we've traced the seeds of economic despair, the rise of a brutal dictatorship, the terrifying reality of total war, and the massive, heavy toll paid by nations all over the globe. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to reflect on. The institutions we built were designed to save us from ourselves. But looking at the world today, have we truly learned the cost of conflict? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.